Okay, so I'm here with Max Boot. I hope audibly. This is my house in Washington. Welcome.
Thanks
Nice
for
to have
having
you.
me. It's a beautiful house.
Nice to have you back. So you've been doing this amazing book tour, the story of your life. What is that like to write something so personal?
It's a strange feeling. I mean, I've never really written much about myself up until now. All my other books have obviously been about other people, and my last book was examining very minutely the life of Edward Lansdale, the legendary CIA operative, and I felt like I really got inside his life in a way that very few other people had done, and it was almost voyeuristic to learn as much as I did about him. But I've always been much more comfortable, writing about other people because I'm basically a fairly private person. So this was an unusual experience for me to plumb my own memories and to try to understand not only how America got to this point and the conservative movement got to this point, but how I personally got to this point. And so it was interesting, in some ways uncomfortable, but also kind of therapeutic to try to come to grips with my own life.
Well, I'm not going to be able to remember the year I first met you, but you had stepped into the Wall Street Journal. You're about a decade younger than me, I guess.
In fact, I think I stepped into your very job.
It may have done, but
that's right. Assistant op editor.
Right. And you had, when I first met you, you had the Robert Bartley affect. Bob Bartley, famously.
Does that mean I never spoke?
He's very soft-spoken. David Brooks once had this great joke about the late Bob Bartley. Somebody said to him, "I'm not sure whether I've ever met Bob Bartley," and David said, "Then you've met Bob Bartley." Because Bob Bartley was someone who's simultaneously intensely self-effacing and soft-spoken in private, but absolutely ferocious. You put him at the typewriter, he became absolutely a ferocious combatant.
Right.
And so you had that affect, and I having one of the things I learned from this book is, and then I'd known your writing on historical subjects, on policy subjects, but you had the same like molten core that Bob Bartley did. So I can see why the two of you found each other.
Yes. No, I think Bob was probably a similar personality type in that he was fairly mild in person, very quiet, but he was kind of a ninja warrior of the printed page, who would, disembowel his opponents with a few flicks of his metaphorical sword. And I guess I'm kind of the same way. I mean, my partner, often kind of makes fun of me, saying, "Why are you so outspoken in print? Why are you so outspoken on TV? But you're so quiet when we're at the dinner table. How come you don't speak up more?"
Right. Right. Well, there's a classic answer that said Joseph Addison, the English essayist who founded the Spectator, this Fred Richard Steele, was at a dinner party, and a woman said to him, "Mr. Addison, I don't understand how someone so witty in print can be so dull in person." And he said, "Madam, I have thousands in the bank, but only 6 pence in my pocket."
Very good. I'll have to use that.
And, so you and I, we do have, despite the age gap, we have some similar backgrounds. We're both immigrants in the United States.
That's true.
Both from large northern hemisphere countries, Russia, Canada, both hockey superpowers.
Yes.
We both worked on the Wall Street Journal editorial page, and then you had a pretty typical, very successful, but typical career within the conservative world. After that, you went from the Wall Street Journal editorial page to a think tank, mainstream one, that's the Council on Foreign Relations. You wrote these well thought of books, and then you have been through this sort of searing personal experience. So I want to go forward, and then we'll jump backward. So was the Trump experience for you a sudden or a gradual one?
It was pretty sudden. I mean, I was completely and viscerally opposed to him from the moment that he came down that damn escalator denouncing Mexicans as rapists and murderers. I just did not think you could or should be able to say things like that and get ahead in American politics. So I thought, he was finished at that point. I thought he was finished a few weeks later when he said he didn't like people like John McCain because he didn't like people who were captured.
You said when I said sudden. But you have had this very wide-ranging technique. I mean, Christopher Hitchens had this experience where he suddenly lost faith in socialism. And he described this as like falling down a hill. And that there's every time he would grab something to try to break his fall, it would snap in his hand. But that for him happened over the course of about a decade. In your case, was it weeks, months, where you said, I'm disgusted with Trump. I'm out of this whole world in which I've lived my life. Was that a matter of weeks or months?
It took about a year, I would say, from the time when Trump announced his presidential run. I assumed at that point that he would not win a single Republican primary. I assumed that he would be kind of the Howard Dean of the Republican Party. He would make a lot of noise in the run-up to the elections, but then when the voting started, Republican voters would get serious, realize this guy had no business being president, and not support him. And so the real shock for me was not the fact that Donald Trump was running or even that he was getting 20, 30% in the polls. The real shock came when the primaries began and he started winning them. And then he was on his way to the Republican nomination, and pretty much every single high-level Republican that I had any respect for kowtowed to him, withdrew their criticisms of him, and essentially bent the knee to him. And so by the time he got to the summer of 2016, when he was the nominee and had the support of the entire party, that's when I was thoroughly disgusted with the GOP. And I kind of resolved in my own mind that I would give the Republican Party another few months, because let's see what happens in the general election. I, still naive as I was, imagined that Donald Trump would lose a landslide to Hillary Clinton. I mean, my logic, by the way, which shows you how little I know about this country, is my logic was, well, I'm a hardcore conservative Republican. I've never voted for a Democrat in my life, but I'm going to vote for Hillary Clinton. It's not a close call for me. It's an obvious decision. And so I assumed that if Donald Trump could not get the support of someone like me, he could not possibly win, which just shows you how disconnected I am from the mainstream of the Republican Party. And so I naively imagined that he would go down to a crushing historic defeat, and the next day the Republican Party would come to its senses. And when the exact opposite happened, and of course he won, that's when I came to my senses and decided I can't be part of this anymore. And, I still held out, again, a little bit naively, I still held out hope. Perhaps he would grow in office, perhaps he would be more moderate and mainstream and thoughtful in office than he had been as a candidate. Perhaps, as he said, he would be the most presidential president since Lincoln. And of course, those hopes were dashed on Inauguration Day when he gave a completely dystopian inaugural address. And from that point, it was just obvious that the presidency was going to be more of the campaign. And, sadly, the Republican Party has gone along with that, and I just checked out.
Your book is very personal. It's very scorching, but in some ways it is sort of circumspect, because you do refrain from comment about people you knew personally, many of whom started in a similar place to you and came to a different calculation. And that's the story of the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which began by being also horrified by Trump, but made its peace with him. That's our alma mater in a way. And that's described, I think, many of the people we know. So I won't, having decided to be circumspect, I won't ask you now yet to be uncircumspect. But was that conscious that you decided to spare people you knew personally?
Well, I didn't want to make it too personal with individuals who were friends of mine. I mean, I still retain some vestiges of our friendship, and so don't want to excoriate people by name and print. I certainly have excoriated the high-profile figures, including folks that I advised, such as Marco Rubio and Paul Ryan and many others. The public figures in the Republican Party, I chose not to name names of private individuals, but anybody who's familiar with our world can pretty obviously guess who I'm talking about.
What do you think? How would you? Okay, so I won't ask you to name names here, but let's think about people who made a different set of decisions from you. Can you understand their logic?
Sort of. I mean, barely. It's a stretch, but yeah. I mean, in fact, I was sitting not too far from where we're sitting right now in the summer of 2016 with one of your neighbors, not literal neighbors, but somebody who lives not too far from here, who was one of my best friends and somebody who was, I thought shared my views. And I remember this was somebody who at the beginning of 2016 was as critical of Trump as I was, but by the summer of 2016, when Trump was getting the nomination, I remember sitting in his backyard and saying, hey, there's no way I can support this guy. I'm going to vote for Hillary Clinton. And of course he said, no, I'm going to vote for Trump. And not only do I think that he will win, but I think he deserves to win. And I was shocked by that. And this guy basically said to me, well, your problem, Max, is you're very idealistic and you think that politics is about ideas. I think it's a tribal exercise, and Donald Trump is the leader of my tribe, so I got to go with my tribe.
Right.
And that was a way of looking at politics that, frankly, had never occurred to me, but appears to be much more widespread than the way I look at politics.
It is pretty widespread. Again, I won't name names, but I'll think of someone else who and we may even be talking about the same person, come to think of it, but I heard this person say, who is a latecomer to conservative politics, say, having arrived so late, I can't be on my own. And that is an interesting. Let's ask about this. And one of the questions that when I sent the word out that you would be here, I got a question that asked, how much do you think your background, your biographical background as a Russian immigrant, and B, your ideological background as a neoconservative rather than some other kind of conservative, how much do you think that explains where you ended up?
It probably has a fair amount to do with it, although it's hard to draw a direct connection. I think it is interesting to me when I look at the profile of never Trump conservatives, of whom there are probably a dozen of us left at this point. It's not a huge group, but I do think that there is a disproportionate number who are themselves minorities, in particular either Jews or Mormons. I think those are a lot of the never Trump conservatives, whereas I've noticed that the mainstream evangelicals and Catholics have been much more ready to go along with Donald Trump for whatever reason. And I think that just as somebody who comes from an immigrant in a minority background, I am much more concerned about majoritarian abuse and the takeover of populist nationalism, because that is something that just ancestrally just feels very familiar and very frightening to me in a way that it probably does not to people who are, native-born Christians and can much more readily assimilate themselves to Donald Trump's white nationalist agenda.
And
I mean, put another way, I don't think I am, part of the America that Donald Trump is talking about. Okay, I'm part of the America that he hates. I am not part of the America that he wants to make great again.
Well, you call yourself a never Trump conservative. To what extent do you use that word? I mean, one of the things that I just preface, I find very comfortable with the adjective conservative because I'm super conservative, but I'm less and less comfortable with the noun a conservative because it describes membership in a community that is increasingly defined by its fealty to Donald Trump.
Right.
But you seem in some ways actually also ceasing to be conservative even in the adjectival sense.
Yeah, I don't know how to describe myself these days except that I'm confused. I mean, I would say that I am of the center-right. I would say, it's interesting because I used to think of myself as a Reagan conservative, and now I'm realizing, in part because I've changed and in part because conservatism has changed, I'm really a Rockefeller Republican, or as I prefer to call it, an Eisenhower Republican, which is a species that is almost entirely extinct, aside from a few outliers in, folks like Larry Hogan in Maryland or Charlie Baker in Massachusetts, John Kasich in Ohio. It's just a small number of Republicans in blue states, essentially. But it used to be a huge part of the Republican Party, and people who were pro-civil rights, pro-environment, but also believed in fiscal austerity, strong defense, American leadership in the world, socially liberal, fiscally conservative. I mean, that's basically where I am, but there's not really a place in the conservative movement or the Republican Party for people like me. And I'm with you in kind of rejecting the big C conservative label, the conservative movement label, which presupposes commitment to a wide variety of views, a lot of which I can't sign up to. I mean, I can't, for example, in good conscience say that I have to oppose gun control when, I see the fact for myself that we have a much higher rate of gun violence in other Western countries, and we have much weaker gun laws. And so I don't see why I need to support weak gun laws just because this happens to be the NRA position, and the NRA has basically taken over the Republican Party and the conservative movement.
Do you think of yourself as, do you think you've arrived at a resting place, or do you see yourself as still in motion? Like if we would have this conversation 18, 24 months from now, and I want to ask you a little farther than that, do you think you will say you're consistent with where you are, or do you have a sense of yourself as still moving?
I think I'm still in motion. I really don't know where I'm going to end up, in part because I don't know where American politics is going to end up. It's very much in flux right now. It feels to me, I feel a little bit like some of the original neocons in the 1970s, folks like Irving Kristol, who decided they could no longer be part of the Democratic Party, but it took a much longer time for them to be comfortable becoming part of the Republican Party because they felt a lot of unease with Republicans, and I think for very good reasons, because the very things that made them very uneasy about the Republican Party, in particular their hostility to civil rights, among other things, I think it's very much still an issue with the modern Republican Party. But I'm, having left that party, but I'm still uneasy with a lot of things in the Democratic Party, including, especially the things exemplified by the Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders progressive wing of the Democratic Party. So, but I'll be the first to admit that my views have also changed somewhat. I can't say that I think my views have changed less than the views of Republicans who used to, espouse free trade and support immigration and American global leadership, and now support Donald Trump. Their views have changed much more than mine, but I think my views have changed as well, and I really don't know where I'm going to end up.
Let's just see if I've got some questions being forwarded here, so let me just see if any of them have shown up. And
I'll have a sip of your excellent whiskey.
Yes, no. So I'm drinking bourbon because I'm in touch with the real America. And you're drinking globalist scotch,
exactly.
Monkey Shoulder.
Yeah.
And let me just see if we've got
revealing my Cuck Rhino origins.
Yeah. All right. Now, I don't think I have things here that we're going to use. And I've used the questions that came in advance. Is forwarding this on. All right. No, we'll keep going. What do you comfortably read these days, and what that you formerly might have read and stopped reading?
Comfortably read in terms of books or periodicals?
Authors. What are who? Okay, that's a name question. Okay. Do you still read the Wall Street Journal?
I do, although these days more of the news pages than in the editorial page. I still enjoy the book reviews on Saturday, for example. I still think they have excellent news coverage.
You still read the National Review?
Not really. But I confess I never read National Review that regularly anyway.
What do you make of those? I've noticed, again, I'll withhold names. I've noticed that some of the people who are non-Trump in the conservative world, who have similar ethnic and cultural backgrounds to ours, often seem very whipsawed, and that they wake up in the morning and they can't remember who they're madder at that day, Trump or Trump critics. And there's something from a journalistic point of view often very interesting about those people, but how do you react to that? And I think you can identify some of the people I mean. They just, some days Trump is the thing that bothers them. Some day it's something called the left, whatever that's supposed to mean. Some day it's somebody that rude to Sarah Sanders at a drive-through. Right. When you see that, do you think those are people who are wrestling with something, or how do you interpret that?
Well, I interpret that as people who are having a hard time letting go of their tribal identity, that basically don't have much in common ideologically with Trump and the modern Republican Party, but are still very much invested in that identity as Republicans or as conservatives, and have trouble letting go of that. And so therefore they become angered or outraged by what they perceive to be insults to the conservative movement of the Republican Party, because they still feel a corporate loyalty to those brands. And so I think they're just very confused, and as you say, whipsawed between their revulsion at Trump and their revulsion at Trump critics. And I think one of the widespread phenomena you see is anti-Trumpism, where people on the right who have a hard time actually defending Trump prefer instead to attack Trump critics. And even people who, I mean, you've seen people shift also, because I think the number of anti-Trump conservatives is rapidly declining. And I think we lost a few more after the Kavanaugh nomination, where more and more conservatives are basically making their peace with Trump. And the way they do that is not so much by praising Trump, although they will begrudgingly say things like, but at least he gives us judges, but then they will attack Trump's critics by suggesting that, we've just made up our minds, we don't acknowledge all the good things that he has done, we're closed-minded, we're not willing to judge him on the merits. They're trying to do a straddle, I think, of moving much closer to Trump and his critics.
Yeah. Well, there is this phenomenon I call having arguments about arguments. That which is something. One of my personal resolutions is never to do that. And people say, I don't like the way this thing is discussed. It is true that a shrinking number of non-Trump conservatives. I don't have the number at fingertips. I wrote about it in my book. I think there's something like 24 people who contributed articles to famous National Review Never Trump.
Right.
And fewer than half remain in any way Trump skeptical. And the majority have become somewhere between Trump supporters to really full. Brent Bazell is one of the people who contributed to the Never Trump. Andy McCarthy contributed to the Never Trump issue, and they're now, Sarah Sanders could, can look over her right shoulder. These guys barreling down there. They're more committed to Trump than she is.
Right. I think one thing to keep in mind with people like that is I don't really think that they have freedom of thought as long as their income is coming from a conservative source, essentially. I mean, this is something that I discovered only upon leaving the mainstream conservative movement, is how much pressure there is to conform. It's professional pressure, it's social pressure, it's pressure from funders, from friends, from employers. I mean, what would somebody like Brent Bozell or these other individuals, what would they do if they denounced Donald Trump? How would they make a living?
Yeah. Yes. Well, and because one of the things that has happened with the conservative is they've never built a media. The media, it depends on, it's not a business. These media depend on a few wealthy supporters. And the wealthy supporters have, in most cases, not in all, become very enthusiastic people.
Right.
And isn't it one of the ironies of this?
In fact, I had somebody you know who runs a conservative think tank who told me, hey Max, I agree with you, but I can't say anything because my board of directors would be angry.
Isn't it one of the ironies here that actually on those things, that the detested globalists and corporate elite from Trump campaigning have on the dollars and cents issues have won almost every fight?
Yeah, it's been terrible to see, and I think he has bought off a huge slice of the Republican elite who are probably not sympathetic to him on cultural issues, but just love the fact that he's putting money in their pocket with this unfunded tax cut.
There's something I noticed that, and again, this is the Bob Balch, Bartley Predator personality. It's this very, strained exterior and then this seething, molten passion interior. And it's hard for me because I'm kind of the opposite. Like I'm really voluble and noisy and so on. But actually, there's in the Bostonians that one of the characters observes are two kinds of people in this earth: those who take things hard and those who take things easy. And I'm definitely in the latter group. But one of the things I see, and maybe this is just for Twitter posts, you'll write something and somebody will say, "Yeah, but you have not repudiated everything that Richard Nixon did in his first term," and that really seems, I think, to bother you. And my question is, this idea that people sometimes say, well, these left-wingers will say, if I don't, pass through these purity tests, that isn't that also an argument about an argument? Like, why do you care what they think? If there are people say, you still think, you're still not sure about the Iraq War, and you think, and you think if you had to do it again, the arguments for removing Saddam Hussein are very compelling, and if you won't apologize for that, I won't follow you on Twitter. And my reaction is, don't follow me on Twitter.
Oh, no, I agree. I'm not going to satisfy those people. And
But like, why even worry about that?
Well, I mean, I don't worry about. I mean, I engage with a very small percentage of those negative attacks on negative tweets and attacks on Twitter. I mean, believe me, truly a minuscule percentage of what comes my way, and occasionally there's just something, especially if it appears in some kind of publication, not if it's just some random, troll in Twitter land. But if it's in some publication, I will fire back, in part because I am by nature argumentative. But I do think that there is a public sphere out there, and as a public intellectual, I'm committed to debate at some level, and I will engage with. I mean, the way I view it is, I will engage with civil critics. I mean, I'm not going to engage with just outright name callers, but if there's civil criticism, I will often respond. But I mean, I'm not writing articles in response. I'm not writing a tweet which takes 30 seconds.
Can I ask what a friend Tucker Carlson?
Yeah.
So
friend in quote marks. Well, he might actually be a friend of yours.
Well, he was. There was a time when he was, and I mean, I think maybe even theoretically still is.
Not one of your neighbors, right?
Yes. So you occupy. I looked at his new book, and you occupy a considerable place in it.
Is that right? I haven't looked at it.
Well, it's interesting. It's like.
But did I make the cover like Bill Crystal? That's what I want to know. I'm chagrined. I didn't make the cover.
You didn't make the cover. But I mean, it's a strange thing. It's not exactly a book. It's more. It's sort of a collection of dialogue. You occupy a large space. Tell me the story. What is your background with Tucker? Why are you so important to him?
I don't know. I've asked myself that very question because I had the most vitriolic interview of my life with him a year and a half ago, or whatever it was, on his show, where he told me that I should do something I'm good at, like painting houses or selling insurance. I mean, it was just a nonstop stream of ad hominem insults. It was kind of like having a bucket of sewage dumped on my head. And after, I tried to give as good as I got, but after I got off, I was wondering, like, did I run over Tucker's dog without realizing it? What did I do to this guy that would make him hate me so much? But it's not just me, I would say. He also seems to have a lot of animus against our mutual friend Bill Crystal, who once employed him. And I never really knew Tucker. Even when he worked at Weekly Standard, I admired his writing. I thought he was a very clever, gifted writer. And I feel like, he has basically sold out his gifts to become this right-wing carnival barker on Fox News, who is basically, like the Don Rickles of the right, who engages in insult comedy for this vast audience, and also, by the way, promotes this far-right white nationalist agenda. And for some reason, he has particular animus against me. I can't explain it. Maybe he'll shrink to tell you why.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I truly, as far as I know, I've never actually done anything to Tucker that would make him hate me as much as he seems to hate me.
Right. So you haven't had there's no personal backstory there?
No, absolutely.
You think it's ethnic?
I mean, as I said, I'm yes, minister. You can say that, minister, but I couldn't possibly.
Right.
I will say this. I mean, it's kind of, it's almost a caricature of somebody named Tucker Carlson, with the last name for a first name, who grew up in La Jolla and is the son of this ambassador and wealthy business figure and inherited money and so forth. He is the champion of the common man, of the real America, against the hordes of immigrants who are supposedly invading. I mean, it's not a good look.
Well, it's not. You have to make it work. You have to leave out a lot of. One of the things that goes with this, and I was thinking, it's a point that it's not about America. It's about a fantasy of America. And the data point I keep using, but there are many. Come to drivers on this. Many, not a few, many more Americans practice yoga than watch NASCAR. And by the way, many more Americans are licensed yoga instructors than mine coal. So that in fact there's this kind of weird thing with that the idea that the culture of Appalachia is not actually the mainstream of American culture, and it's not, by the way, and it's for sure not the mainstream of American culture at the building on Avenue of the Americas, in which Fox News is warehouse, where the main activities are eating expensive steak dinners and sexually harassing the employees.
Right, and I love the fact that Sean Hannity, who makes like $30 million a year or something and flies in his own private plane, is the tribute of the common man. And I'm a globalist elitist when I do not make $30 million a year.
Well, there's a question of what constitutes an elite. There's a sense in which this is true. This is where you realize the complexity of the American class structure, which is, it's true that Sean Hannity is very rich. And it's true that he has a private plane. But he's also stupid. And
there is that.
And that's, I think, the core of the claim. And I think that is the fundamental falseness in the Tucker position. Because Tucker's not stupid.
Right.
Like, I have this. I
should know better.
I have this game I used to play where, Lucifer appears in the middle of the night to a series of rightly talking figures and says, I can make you richer in more things if you would say exactly the opposite. And when I played the game a dozen years ago, that I could see Rush Limbaugh really weighing it, but then decided, I've just got too much invested in where I am, and I can see Bill Riley, absolutely, he'd do it. I think Tucker would do it.
Of course.
Sean Hannity wouldn't understand the question. You have to explain it. You have to really walk him through it, and then I don't know what he'd do, but he probably couldn't do it, because I think I credit Sean Hannity with, he reflects who and what he is. Whereas look, the camera finds you out. I think obviously it's found something real in Tucker that maybe he didn't know was there.
Something real and ugly.
Yeah, and maybe he didn't know it's there. And I think one of the things, one of the things maybe that reflects on you is Sean Hannity could not care less.
I'm crushed.
Yeah. But Tucker sort of does, obviously. And again, I think it goes to, unlike Sean Hannity, not being stupid.
I suppose that's true. I mean, there is, I have trouble figuring out people like Tucker or Ingram and Coulter, because they seem like they're kind of acting at some level. It seems like what they do it kind of with a wink and a nudge.
But look, I think one of the things...
It's like performance art.
It is, but it's also true.
But, I would quickly just add, though, if you pretend to be something long enough, you do become that person.
Also, because we use racism only as an epithet nowadays, I don't think we are able to categorize and analyze accurately a politics founded on racial belief, which was quite normal in America from the founding until the day before yesterday. And so it's quite possible that somebody like, could be doing things with wink and nod, but would sincerely be committed to that the American state, never mind the American population, but the American state is identified with a certain racial order. And I think one of the things that is powerful about Putin's Russia, and one of the reasons why a lot of the alt-right, Russia is a highly multi-ethnic society, as Americans often don't understand. In fact, Barack Obama, when he was one of his, recently, he said, I don't see a lot of immigrants coming to Russia. Well, in fact, Russia is the second, in absolute terms, the second largest recipient of immigrants on Earth after the United States.
Yeah, and they have the largest Muslim population in Europe.
Right. And they come from, and they are ethnically different. They come from Central Asia. But in Russia, the ethnic minority, they don't have political rights. The state is a European state, even if the people are not European people.
Yep.
And that's a vision, that's what America was from the colonial founding, really through the Civil War until the Great Wave. It was only the Great Immigration after the Civil War that confirmed that America would be a predominantly European country. As late as the 1860s, a sixth or fifth of the population is from Africa. And of course, the Indian tribes weren't counted. There's still quite a lot of them in the 1860s too. So you think, well, and Coulter, they must be kidding, because they can't have a kind of politics that was extremely common in America until very recently, which is, the state should be run by certain kinds of people, regardless of populations.
I think that's certainly the politics of Donald Trump in a very unthinking and reflexive kind of way, because I think all these people, the Tucker Carlsons and Donald Trumps, reflect the nostalgia for the 1950s, i.e., for the pre-civil rights world, the world in which white supremacy was just taken for granted.
But maybe it's not nostalgia. Maybe it's Putinship. Maybe it's a total for the future. Because look, multi-ethnic societies are difficult things to run. And one way to run them is to say, well, let's try to, as the United States, let's try to have cut everybody in. Or you might say, well, let's have an elite that this is a little bit what people fear in places like Silicon Valley, an elite that is highly removed from the population, but at least is representative. That it's a plutocracy, but by God, it's a plutocracy made up of every ethnic group, men and women, and they're all equal.
It's a meritocracy as well as a plutocracy.
But one way the Putin answer is you can run a multi-ethnic society if one group monopolizes political power.
Right. But that doesn't work in a democracy where everybody has a vote and the ethnic composition of the society is changing. So as you know, we're going to be majority-minority by the 2040s.
Well, that's why Putin is such an interesting person, because he snuffed out whatever little there was of Russian democracy. And maybe that's why he's excited to a lot of Americans. It's a way. Well, and by the way, democracy doesn't have to be on or off. You can have more or less. As the state of George says, right? Even a less, you can have many of the forms of democracy with less of the context. I think one of the things that can be a problem in understanding authoritarian movements is to assume that they are nostalgic, when in fact they can be often quite futuristic.
Yeah. Well, I think they can be both at the same time.
So, big election coming up in November. Never mind your hopes, what do you think is likely to happen, and what do you think would be the best outcome of it?
I mean, I have no prediction to offer, and I feel like I should retire as a prognosticator after having expected that Donald Trump would lose both the Republican nomination and the general election. I never imagined that he would be where he is. So, my predictions about any election are essentially worthless. But I will offer my hope of what will happen, which is that Democrats will take at least one house of Congress, presumably the House of Representatives. And I think that's incredibly important to restore some checks and balances in our democracy. And if it doesn't happen, I truly fear for the future of the Republic, because that will be a signal to Trump and the Republican Party to double down on everything that they're doing now, from obstruction of justice to racism, and they're gonna ramp that up dramatically.
Do you worry about the Democratic left getting too empowered, or is that not something you worry about?
Well, not at this point. I mean, there's no way they could possibly take over, right? Because whatever happens, the Senate is going to be closely divided, and Trump is still going to be in the White House. I mean, maybe that's an issue for 2020 if there's a chance of a Democratic sweep and Democrats controlling all three houses, in which case there is, I think, a danger of kind of the most progressive tendencies in the Democratic Party taking over and swinging America very far to the left, and then causing another major right-wing reaction. Or maybe they swing to the left on things like this. I mean, let's not forget, Bernie Sanders was also against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Hillary Clinton pretended to be. Right. On a lot of issues, there's actually commonality. They're all protectionists. They're all suspicious of American leadership. So they're not, they're also populist in some sense. So there's, they're divided on many issues, but there's also some disturbing overlap. So, and I certainly do not want to see, the Sanders one wing of the party taking over all of Washington, and that's physically impossible in November. That's not going to happen, right? That's a concern down the road. At this point, my position is vote for every single Democrat on the ballot, because.
Did you vote for Leslie Coburn? Did you vote for?
I would vote for anybody with a D after their name at this point, because the point is not the individual representatives. The point is to create some checks and balances on Donald Trump. And there's some good Republicans and some bad Democrats. But one thing that we've learned is that even the best Republicans will not stand up to Donald Trump. And even the worst Democrats will vote with their party on issues like subpoenaing, Trump's banking records, for example, or what have you, information that the public needs to have. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about which Democrats get elected, as long as Democrats get elected in November. Now, down the road, maybe in the future, if Democrats are actually going to take power, that becomes more of a concern.
This is the last question. set of questions about the texture of your daily life. As you can hear through the door, there are a number of dogs who live with me, and so that's why people ask me, what's it like for you? And I said, the saying in Washington is, if you need a friend, get a dog. I have 2 dogs. I've got no problem. But you don't have dogs.
I'm friendless, but I'm not in Washington either.
So what's the texture of your life like? You wake up in the morning, what happens?
Well, if I'm in New York and I don't have to do something right away, I'll go to the gym and then come home and often write a column for the Washington Post, either at home or at my office. Probably at home, and then sometimes I'll go into my office at the Council on Foreign Relations, do some things there, maybe work on a book or host a meeting or attend some kind of conference or what have you. And then often at night I will go over to CNN because I'm a CNN analyst now, and so I usually do either the Don Lemon or Anderson Cooper programs in the evening. So
do people recognize it?
You mean in the street?
Yeah.
Occasionally, sometimes. I mean,
is everyone comfortable?
No, I mean, I'm not.
It's New York.
I'm not Brad Pitt. I'm not being chased by hordes of groupies. I mean,
is everyone comfortable? You have to change planes at Dallas Fort Worth Airport.
I've never had anything but good experiences with people on the street who come up and say, "Hey, love what you're doing. Keep it up." That kind of thing.
Different kind of threats.
Not personally. I mean, I've gotten threatening emails or tweets or what have you, but never face to face.
I noticed this. I've had a certain amount of uncomfortable, but I've never had anything that I consider a credible threat. And I was talking to April Ryan, a colleague of yours at CNN, and she just showed me her. I don't know how she was, and I'm struck by the incredible disproportion between the abuse that women get and the abuse that men get, and just how vivid and personal and imminent it is compared to anything. It's not name. I get a certain amount of name calling, but like somebody who reveals knowledge of your emotions and then threatens to do bodily harm. That's
very scary. I mean, I've gotten, as I'm sure you have gotten, a lot of anti-Semitic garbage, which is something I never experienced blissfully until the rise of Donald Trump, and that's become a pretty common form of email and Twitter communication.
But you've never had anything that makes you sort of worry about whether the people you rob are safe?
Mercifully not.
Any last thoughts? Anything I should have asked? Anything you want to ask me? We got just before we wrap up.
Well, I'd be curious where you're at these days, because you're somebody who left mainstream conservatism before I did, so I would credit you with greater awareness of what was going on than I had. But how would you describe your own political position these days?
Here's a premise. I think the political world I grew up in is just gone. It's like asking somebody who grew up before the French Revolution, which faction of the court they identify with. The court's gone. I still stand by. I think many of the things done by conservatives in the years from 1978 to 1994 were valuable and necessary. Reducing the level of crime, bringing down the inflation. I don't give conservatives sole credit for the end of the Cold War in favorable terms, but I think Ronald Reagan played an important part, and people around him played an important part in bringing. I think those are real accomplishments. The microeconomic liberalization, deregulation, those are important accomplishments. And I played a tiny part in some of them. Many of them happened just before I came on the scene and influences in me. So I still internalize them as things I'm proud of and identify with. But I also think that the story of the conservative movement, I think of it as an anthology of solutions to the problems of the 1970s. Some of which were good solutions, some of which were bad solutions, some of which were good solutions that couldn't be implemented. And the problems of the 70s are gone. The politics is an exam that goes on forever and in which the questions constantly change. I think one thing that's happening in the Trump years is we went on replaying the politics of the 70s for a third of a century. Often with the same people. Newt Gingrich never went away. And Trump served notice. It's over. It's over. Trump manifestly does not believe in conservative politics, doesn't get it, doesn't know what it is. He's proven that many of the conservative people in the conservative world were just as done with it as he was. And when we're on the other side of this thing, we're going to get a nuclear war in a way that 1960 that happened last. The last comparison is what happened on either side of the Vietnam War and civil rights. So 1965 to be a Democrat and to be for labor and to identify with ethnic Catholics in the big cities, maybe to be with the white South, and then on the other side, if you were a college-educated professional, Queen 1965, of course you were a Republican, and in 1975 you probably were. And I think we can go through that, and then so to say, but it's in motion. So to say, where will you be when the earthquake is over? I don't know. Depends on whether my house is still standing or not. Yeah. But here's what I'm going to go on. I believe in American power. When it comes to international relations, I'm Keynesian. I don't think they manage themselves. My core belief about that is I believe that American power is objectively weakening, and that means that America needs friends more than it used to do, and therefore America has to be friendly. The kind of national egotism that is strategically stupid because it leaves you isolated, and America is not strong enough to be America alone. I believe in free trade, but that bringing China to the food system has been a much more difficult problem, and we therefore need things like a Pacific Partnership to build an international trade order that can be presented to China. I believe in the I believe that the conservatives are right about the microeconomy. I think they're wrong. They've proven themselves wrong about the macroeconomy. Like in 2009, predicting the inflation and so on, and not being willing to back the TARP and the other bailouts. I think that the last four months of Bush's presidency is finest out.
I actually heard Jeff Flake in New York at the CNN Forum yesterday saying that was the thing that he was most ashamed of in his career in Washington, that he voted against the TARP.
Good for him, because that was, and it also put the moment this way, that not every decision made between September, letting Bear Stearns go bust in the spring of 2008 was a mistake. Letting Lehman go bust in September, they saved Bear Stearns. It was a mistake. I think what happened between April and March, between those two administrations, it was one of the finest hours in American history. Not everything was done right, and sometimes even when you do everything right, the results are still pretty bad. But if you'd done everything wrong, you would have had a Great Depression, the overthrow of the capitalist system, the rise of military dictatorships, and we didn't have that. We just had, Viktor Orban.
Right.
And so those things I still believe. But I think I guess I'm guessing. I know I'm a creature of the center right by outlook and temperament, and so I'm guessing that's where I will be in 2020. One last thing to say: this is the one thing, however, that I really have made my mind up about, and especially after reading David Garota's amazing interview and said, when I'm 65, I am quitting regular politics. Old Jewish men go crazy. And I'm just so frightened of. And one of the things, and you watch
I think that's one data point. I don't know if it's a rule.
Yeah. Well, you just like the Alan. You just watch him and think, okay. I don't want to be that guy. I don't think
there's any danger of you becoming that guy. Please keep writing.
That cranky, crushing guy. Thank you for making the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I hope everyone enjoyed it. And I'm sorry I didn't have a system where I could read the questions better. But you know what? You did great on your own. So thank you.
It was a great conversation. Thanks very much.